Глазам не верю, лифт. Я была бы рада и лестнице. Я немного разбираюсь в электричестве. Думаю, этот провод ведет к щитку.
This area is the dramatic culmination of all the lightless combat that comes before it. We wanted to create a dynamic fight that lasted several minutes while you waited for the elevator to arrive. The first iteration of this battle was very different from what we eventually shipped. The space was larger, had water in it, and wasn't completely dark. Water is relatively expensive performance-wise, so we cut that in favor of more zombies. We made the level smaller to ensure that the player would see the elevator and recognize the problem that needed to be solved before the fight started. We killed the lights both to enhance tension and to make the scene a final test of the dark fighting skills that the player develops over the course of the episode. Finally, we added a wire running along the ceiling from the elevator to the power box to give players a guide as they familiarize themselves with the area.
In early versions of the episode, Alex was much more vocal about giving the player hints. However, playtest showed it was much more satisfying for the players when Alex stated a goal and then stepped aside until that goal was accomplished. Because of that feedback, almost all of Alex's hint lines were cut. Eventually, though, we discovered through more playtesting that although players didn't like having Alex hand them unsolicited hints, they did want to be able to explicitly request help from her. So we added some of the hint dialogue back in, but it's only accessible at the player's request by Plus using Alex. Unfortunately, we learned these hint lessons late in the development cycle and didn't have time to properly train players for this feature. We plan to integrate the hint-on-demand dialogue more thoroughly in future episodes.
Our art and gameplay standards encourage players to build a visual dictionary that defines how they expect things to work in the Half-Life world. For instance, even though the door to the power box room is metal, and would probably have a metal crossbar holding it shut, we barred it with a wooden plank. Because we've been consistent throughout the game, the player should recognize that a wooden plank can be both broken and manipulated with a gravity gun, properties that wouldn't be immediately apparent about a metal bar.
Свети на зомби! Держи его в луче света.
We're really happy with the Zombine's grenade behavior. It adds sudden danger spikes to the zombie horde, which forces players to quickly reprioritize the targets. And since the player can grab a grenade out of the Zombine stand with a gravity gun, these danger spikes can be converted into offensive opportunities. This kind of turnaround skill shot creates some dynamic, satisfying hero moments for the player. Originally, we didn't allow the player to snatch Zombine grenades because we fairly broke the fiction of the gravity gun. If players could grab a Zombine's grenade, why couldn't they grab the Combine soldiers' guns? After playtesting the grenade steal though, fun went out of its consistency.
Эй, слышишь? Лифт заработал. Свети на зомби! Ха! Боже! Только бы еще не стемнело.
Повторяю.
Слава богу, еще не стемнело. Уходим отсюда.
Если вы все еще там, прошу вас со всей
Нет!
активностью, на которую
Нет, нет! Заперто! Ерунда какая-то!
наших эвакуационных пунктов, спешу вас обрадовать.
Эй, там! Наверху! Эй! Выпустите нас! Эй!
Функцию размножения. Эти поля
По-моему, они нас не слышат. Как их открыть?
теперь с исчезновением полей для всех желающих настало время плодиться и размножаться. Иными словами, и проще говоря, пора задуматься.
Похоже, здесь был вентиль, но его отломали. Есть? Посмотрим, сработает ли.
Мы полагаем, что благодаря этому все телепорты Альянса, а также система связи, основанная
Давай, Гордон, крути вентиль.
выведена из строя.
Отлично. Окей, бежим к вокзалу, пока не грянул взрыв.
На Земле изолированы, отрезаны от остальных. Тем не менее,
Наконец-то воздух!
считаем, что это время,
Боже мой!
шаг нам
Страйдеры здесь камня на камне не оставили.
малейшая брешь в черной лезе позволила врагу занять плацдарм и расширить портал.
Никогда еще не была так рада доку.
Помимо инопланетных существ, на Земле осталось множество модифицированных человеческих особей, которые сделают все возможное, чтобы восстановить связь и призвать подкрепление. Но даже несмотря
This City 17 vista is an explicit visual reward for surviving the elevator battle. Since early playtesters told us that we weren't communicating just how damaged the city was, this sweeping view of an extremely messed up City 17 serves a practical purpose, as well as being a nice moment of calm between storms. The framing of your first view of the Citadel in this vista space is very deliberate. We included various leading elements, such as wires and light poles, that all drive the player's eye to the Citadel.
One thing we try to do when we're integrating storytelling and gameplay, something that's become a hallmark of ours, is to include non-linear bits of narrative, things that action-oriented players don't have to sit through, but that are available to players who want to learn more about the background of the story. Kleiner's broadcasts on the public address monitors are a good example of this method. Apart from the strong visual image of Dr. Kleiner replacing his former boss on the giant screens, his speech conveys a lot of dense information about the state of the world and how things have changed due to the events of Half-Life 2. We settled on this particular location for the Kleiner cast as one of the few logical places where players can watch in peace or move on to the next encounter. It's essentially a footnote embedded in the world, which makes this a footnote on a footnote.
часть моей речи, она будет крутиться до тех пор, пока в этом будет смысл. Извините за недочеты и ошибки. Как вы понимаете, у нас есть...
Later in the level, there's a combine gunner protected behind some metal plates, just like the ones blocking the player's way here. We placed them here as a training tool to remind players that the gravity gun can grab and detach these things.
Ученого из черной мезы. Просто как и все мы. Осталось добавить...
Они кого-то ищут. Подозреваем нас.
Осторожно, Ламар, эти лапы очень горячие.
Repelling soldiers presented a difficult training problem because we found it's tough to focus the player's attention upward. This entire alley was carefully designed to ensure that the player would see the descending soldiers. First, we framed the soldiers with a straight line of buildings. Then we had them run across the rooftops so they were starkly silhouetted against the sky before they dropped down in front of the lightly colored buildings. Finally, we added a distinctive sound to the repelling action so that the players would recognize it later in the game.
Вот они, с крыши. Яблочко. Я надеялась, нам удастся отойти подальше, прежде чем нас обнаружат.
Восстановили большую часть железнодорожной сети, чтобы дать вам возможность уехать отсюда как можно быстрее. В пригородных районах разбиты временные лагеря и пункты эвакуации. Повторяю, немедленно покиньте город. Уничтожение ядра цитадели, несомненно...
Сначала Компайн, теперь эти твари. Молодцы. Норы перекрыты. Отлично.
Character AI is all about putting on a good show. As we neared the end of production, we were still unhappy with the way that Alex handled herself in combat. The most common thing she did was run backwards while shooting at the enemies. It was fairly realistic, but kinda boring. So we added crouching and aiming at the last minute, and though it didn't really change her combat effectiveness in any functional way, it made her a whole lot more fun to watch. And this is a really good example of how these relatively minor presentation and behavior changes can often have a really major impact on entertainment value.
The post-Half-Life 2 look of City 17 was difficult to nail down, and we went through many changes. We wanted to establish several things, primarily that this was a different part of the same city with a slightly different atmosphere, and that it had been severely damaged. This street was a test bed for a lot of our visual design work. First, we built an intact city street, then we beat up certain buildings, in some cases removing them entirely so that more destruction was visible in the distance. We did initial lighting pass in the game engine and then took screenshots of various locations. Using Photoshop, we manipulated those screenshots to establish a color scheme. Photoshop lets us quickly iterate through all kinds of skies, lighting styles, and color schemes. The environmental lighting colors that we ended up with were based on some photo references of the sun filtering through smoke from a forest fire. Some falling ash effects and a closer than usual fog plane helped sell the effect.
Поддержка резерва. Вводим.
Пока ты разбираешься, я присмотрю за улицей.
Trip mine traps are great, but they were sort of hard to justify given the total chaos of City 17. Even though we couldn't use trip mines a lot, they made sense in this interrupted ambush scene.
Красота! Давай наверх. Все по новой. Сюда я перенастрою схему. Гордон, подожди.
Originally, the player didn't get any weapons until the end of this map, so roller mines were the only way to kill the soldiers. As we added more content to previous levels, it became impractical for players to be without a gun for so long. As a result, players get weapons much earlier now.
Обнаружена кровопотеря.
Отличный бросок, Гордон! Этот снайпер чуть не снес мне голову. Я заберусь наверх и посмотрю, что за тем забором. О-о, улица перегорожена баррикадами. Беги, не останавливайся, я тебя прикрою, не волнуйся. А затем, как подашь знак, побегу к тебе. Похоже, я смогу спустить тебе лестницу. Надо только выбить щеколду. Она слегка заржавела. Есть. Достанешь?